I'm so grateful to be speaking with Joe Lovano. Hi, Joe. How are you?
Hello. Hi, Camila. Nice. Good.
Thank you so much for being here.
It's so nice. Thanks for asking me. And yeah, it's a beautiful day today.
It is. It is in Denver too. We've got some sunshine out here.
It's a blessing to live in the world of music, and really happy to take part in your series.
Well, thank you. We appreciate you being here. Did you say you wanted to start out playing a little something?
Yeah, I think I'd like to just vibrate on some tonalities and feel the space here where I am, and then we could move on from there.
That sounds great. Yeah.
I'm
What a
not
way
sure.
to
I
start this
hope that
off.
came across okay.
It did.
There was no delay or anything, because
No, not at
sometimes on
all.
Zoom it's a
Zoom
little
came
difficult.
through. Beautiful.
Hmm.
Thank you for starting us off with some music.
Ah, nice.
How's everything going in New York these days?
Well, my wife Judy and I just got our second dose,
Oh, awesome. Me too. Congratulations.
so we're feeling good behind that,
Mm-hmm.
and somewhat more optimistic about things to come. You know, it's we're stepping into spring also,
Mm-hmm.
so that feels good.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I always kind of start these interviews off the same way. I like to start by asking you how you first got into music, what initially sparked your love for it. I know your dad was a tenor sax player as well. Could you talk a little bit about how you first got into it and what made you want to become a musician?
Yeah, sure. You know, I was really fortunate. My dad was a really beautiful saxophone player. I'm originally from Cleveland, Ohio, and he uh, had a lot of passion and love for the music. And when he came home from the service, he was in the marching band in the World War II. My dad was born in 1925. So he grew up in the swing and bebop and modern jazz eras, into the freer jazz forms. And late 40s, when he came home and really established himself more on the scene in Cleveland, he was playing opposite and a lot of folks that were coming through town, and had a chance to hear Charlie Parker live and Lester Young, and all of those cats that were touring and playing in all the big bands and things. Illinois Jacquet, Gene Ammons. And my dad had a great record collection because of that. He really was on the scene and playing with people, and in a lot of groups, like as an opening act for folks, Stan Getz and Flip Phillips and others, for example. So as a kid, I was born in 1952, and as a kid, I grew up with his record collection and hearing him practicing and playing all the time. So that was the beginning and the spark. I had horns from really young age. And 5 and 6 years old, he's starting to show me how to put the reed on the mouthpiece, and on the neck of the horn, and to just buzz and get somewhat of a sound. And then putting the horn together and learning the fingering and starting to have a little understanding about the different keys, 12 keys. And into my teenage years, I was really captured, let's say, So that was the beginning, and hearing him practice, and then of course playing in lessons with him, 2 tenors. And when I started to play tenor, I started on alto as a kid, and maybe 11, 12 years old, I got my first tenor. And then during that time, I'm starting to learn some songs as he's teaching me how to play in the key of A flat or D flat or G. He's teaching me songs in those keys by ear. So that was the beginning also of having an understanding of the range of the saxophone and the different colors that happen when you're in different keys. So that was a serious lesson, and still with me today.
Do you have a favorite key?
All 12.
Yeah.
All notes are created equal.
I agree.
And but on the tenor saxophone, certain keys sing out. If you're in the key of B on the horn, you're in this really bright, beautiful color. If you're in the key of D flat, you're in a different color. It's darker. And just the fingering and things that happen in each key really teaches you a lot, And then after a while, you're in all keys, always. No matter what key you're in, you're in all keys that are around it, So the more I play with folks through the years, I realize that understanding gives way to more expressive playing.
Do you remember any like early recordings that just were the most inspiring to you that you still come back to and you can always find inspiration in?
Yeah, Miles Davis is Round About Midnight. John Coltrane, Red Garland, Paul Chambers, Philly Joe Jones. That record, those tunes, the way they played together, and how they were playing, what they were playing. Another important record was John Coltrane's Soul Train. The tunes, also in just a quartet with no trumpet. The way he played I Want to Talk About You, for example, and it was a tune that he continued playing his whole career. There's many recordings of that same tune. but every recording is completely different.
Mm-hmm.
Things like that,
Yeah.
Also
Yeah.
the tempos, some
Mm-hmm.
really bright tempos and some really slow, funky tempos.
Mm-hmm.
It gave me a lot of ideas about practicing and
Mm-hmm.
studying rhythm and being able to execute things on my horn uh, in the different tempos that you're in all the time.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Those two records, but then there were others. Of course, the Bridge, Sonny Rollins with Jim Hall,
Mm-hmm.
Bob Cranshaw, and Ben Riley on drums. Jim Hall was from Cleveland and knew my dad and went to high school with my Uncle Carl,
Nice.
who played trumpet. And Jim Hall was someone that was very influential for me, just knowing that he was from Cleveland and was a friend of my dad's and played with Jimmy Jufrey, and he played with Sonny,
Mm-hmm.
Ella Fitzgerald, uh, Coleman Hawkins, and Ben Webster.
Mm-hmm.
Recorded some with Bill Evans in duo, and I was real hip to Jim. And then years later, when I moved to New York in the mid 70s, I met Jim. And then
Cool.
we started to play together at a certain point,
Mm-hmm.
but not until probably the late 80s into the 90s. You know, my dad played with Tad Dameron too, who was from,
Wow.
right? He was older. He was born in 1917, I think. And he, of course, was in New York, but he would come back to Cleveland. And when he would come home, there were gigs that my dad had played with him. So my dad was playing some of his music,
Wow.
hearing him play, and tunes like Hot House,
Uh-huh.
Good Bait. Tunes like that taught me how to play my horn better.
Mm-hmm.
Just playing the melody and start having an understanding for the harmonic sequence. So those things really stayed with me my whole life. And a lot of that led to my recording 52nd Street Themes,
Mm-hmm.
where I put a nonette together. And this recording won a Grammy. And I've been able to tour the world with this nonette, playing Tad Dameron's music
Mm-hmm.
and my own compositions and things that Gunther Schuller contributed to the book. So I reach into my roots always for my current output and inspiration.
Mm-hmm. Man, there's so many directions to go from there. I thought of like 10 questions.
Mhm.
Um, I guess one, when you mentioned that Miles record and how they played together, and that's really what captured you. And I think you can hear that in all of your bands, regardless of what the instrumentation is. And you have such a diverse list of different combinations of musicians and instruments. And I was wondering how you, when you're maybe putting together a new project, how you first come up with the concept for what that band is going to be, if it's you have the instrumentation in mind or you have the musicians in mind, or maybe like how you put together a new group that always seems to work so incredibly well together.
It's coming from the musicians
Mm-hmm.
and the combination of people and the idea of trying to share the space and create music within the music together,
Mm-hmm.
whether it's a large ensemble or a quintet or sextet or a trio.
Mm-hmm.
you know um, it's the different personalities that help me uh, compose for the group, as well as choose material. You know, uh, I don't say standard songs. I say famous music.
Mm-hmm.
So if I want to play some famous music of Dizzy Gillespie or Billy Strayhorn, I choose the music from who I'm going to be playing with.
Mm-hmm.
Whether it's like if, putting together a group with Hank Jones on piano, and recording with him um, was just a dream. So the material that I chose to play with Hank uh, was definitely uh, fueled by playing with him,
Mm-hmm.
and having him bring in some music also that he wanted to play.
Right.
And then that shapes that repertoire. Playing in a larger ensemble, like from my Universal Language recording, which featured my wife Judy Silvano voice in a vocalized fashion.
Mm-hmm.
Kim Hagen's on trumpet. So the three of us as a front line with brass, woodwinds, and voice. Then I had a different kind of a rhythm section. I had Steve Swallow on electric bass and Charlie Hayden on acoustic bass,
Mm.
Jack DeJohnette on drums, and Kenny Werner on piano. So between us, we played in different formations as an ensemble throughout that recording. Universal Language on Blue Note Records. And I wrote the music for that personnel and tried to feature everyone at different moments within the orchestrations that happened.
Mm-hmm.
But just the way we shared the space together was really magical,
Yeah.
Also, I had a Scott Lee on bass also. So there were 3 bass players within that recording. Now, they didn't all play together. There were moments where just Charlie played or just Scott played.
Mm-hmm.
With Steve Swallow, he played electric bass and played in a way of comping and playing chordal harmonies on electric bass.
Mm-hmm.
And on some of those tunes, I did not have piano. So I had acoustic bass and Steve comping and on electric bass with drums and saxophone. And that created a certain flow that was real
Mm-hmm.
special. For an example,
Mm-hmm.
Also, my band Us Five that
Yeah.
has double drummer configuration. We did 3 recordings: folk art, bird songs, and cross culture, featuring Esperanza Spalding on bass,
Mm-hmm.
James Weidman piano, and Francisco Mela from Cuba on drums, and Otis Brown, the third, from Newark, New Jersey on drums.
Mm-hmm.
So both drummers were coming from different places and their natural feelings, really came through in the music. And there was a whole cultural exchange of ideas that happened in that band.
Mm-hmm.
The repertoire for that quintet with the double drummers took shape from who was playing in the band. And that group is still together today.
Mm-hmm.
Now that Esperanza moved into superstardom, she's not there all the time. She'll make an appearance every now and then, but I have Peter Slavov, who's from Sofia, Bulgaria. He's on some of Cross Culture, where I had the 2 basses with Esperanza and Peter.
Mm-hmm.
He's playing in the band, and this last year, during the pandemic, right, 2020 was Charlie Parker's 100th year anniversary. So we had a lot of dates that did not happen because one of my recordings is Bird Songs, where we focused on Charlie Parker's some of his great tunes, and put them together in a different kind of way with that band. So hopefully in the coming seasons, we'll do some other gigs with that group.
Yeah, I think we all hope so too. We all want to come check it out.
We did do a live stream from Birdland
Cool.
in August around Charlie Parker's birthday.
Hmm.
But it was viewed, it was only viewed once when we did it.
Hmm.
But it might come back again on the Birdland website.
Oh, cool.
Yeah.
Well, that's kind of a good segue to talking about how the last year has been. If you've done a lot of the live streaming stuff, how it's affected you artistically, if it's given you any room to maybe explore things you didn't have time to explore in the past, anything like that?
Well, one thing, I've been trying to really compose a lot and use this time to really reflect, right, on my career and development through the years,
Mhm.
to come up with some new music and new ideas about creating music. I've been writing a lot of ideas. Some are become tunes right away. Others are more sketchy and they evolve into a tune or a piece.
Mhm.
So I've been doing that a lot, and with my wife Judy, we've been doing quite a few live streams playing as a duet
Awesome.
from our studio here, right? Uh, and we've done a bunch of fundraising events for musicians around the world, uh, and in New York. You
Mhm.
know, that's been amazing because we've been putting together a sequence of compositions as a duo, and playing in a fashion that we've always done on gigs and in some studio settings, but never really just as a duet,
Mhm.
uh, where Judy vocalizes, plays percussion, and paints a painting. She's a really prolific artist and has been really emerging in the last years. And so she improvises a painting while we play also.
Mhm.
And then it gives me a chance to also explore some different instruments in the woodwind family. We did a live stream for the Panama Jazz Festival that was aired in January this year, where I had a filmmaker friend of mine, Michael Kelly, who did a film on Paul Motion, come over uh, wearing a mask and with his cameras, and he documented us. And then we put it together to do a presentation for the Panama Festival,
Mhm.
to raise funds for the Danilo Perez Foundation in Panama, right?
Cool.
For kids and environmental concerns and things.
Mhm.
That was amazing because I ended up playing tenor, bass clarinet, soprano saxophone, G mezzo soprano saxophone, C melody, uh, and some drums,
Mhm.
percussion, gongs. And Judy played the balafone and some other percussion instruments and painted a painting. So we put a set together, we had to put a set together like an hour set,
Mhm.
like a real performance, a festival concert set. So we had a sequence of things that we were going to do in an outline form, like a score,
Mhm.
kind of put a score together. And then we played through it. And man, it was so much fun. And that's been really great, to explore some ways of playing with Judy in a duet form, um, where each piece, each episode has a different sound
Mhm.
with the different horns. Judy also played some alto recorder on
Cool.
on one movement with the alto recorder and bass clarinet together. There was like some real beautiful little dance of how we played together, you know. So that idea is definitely something I want to document more in the future.
Mhm.
This is a defining moment for all of us, you know, and to emerge from this with a body of work that has some kind of meaning in our lives, you know, to present in the future. That's something that I'm really focusing on and trying to figure out how to do that, you know.
Yeah. Is there somewhere we can check out that duo recording, or is that the one-time thing for the festival?
You know, on it's excerpts of it are going to be on my website,
Great. Awesome.
joelovano.com. We're going to take different episodes from the pieces that we did. We did about 17 or so pieces
Mhm.
throughout that set. And I'm going to separate them now so we could air those, you know.
Awesome. I'm looking forward to checking them out.
Like something I did something in September, last September. It's called Live in the Pines.
Mhm.
Go to my website. I played with a trio. It was in September, and it turned out to be on Sonny Rollins's 90th birthday,
Wow.
September, right? On the 7th. And I had it was the first time I was gonna have anybody come over to play during the pandemic. So I had a bass player friend and a drummer friend, and John Menegon on bass, and Lamia Strefe played drums. I was just gonna have a little outdoor gathering, you know, in September. Everybody social distancing with masks, the whole thing, you know. But to play a little bit together, because I hadn't played with anybody really from March until that time, right? Except for stuff with Judy. So I had Michael come again, and he documented it. So you could go and see these tunes. There's 8 pieces. Tunes I wrote from March until September. So I documented those, and that gave me an idea how to do this thing for the Panama Festival.
Mhm. That's awesome. Wow. I'm looking forward to checking those out later today. Oh, I was going to kind of segue into your newest release with Trio Tapestry, Garden of Expression, that came out this year, right?
Nice, yes.
Did you record that during the pandemic, or was that previously
Well,
recorded?
it was before the pandemic. We
Okay.
recorded November of 2019
Mhm.
in the middle of a tour we were doing in Europe. Okay. This group, Trio Tapestry, features Marilyn Crispell on piano, beautiful, poetic, incredible musician, and Carmen Castaldi on drums, who's a drummer that I grew up with in Cleveland.
Cool.
And we've been playing together since we were in our late teens. Okay. Carmen moved out west in the mid 70s when I came to New York. And then somewhere around 2000 or so, he came back east, back to Cleveland. And since then, we've been doing different things. He's featured on my recording, Viva Caruso. He's one of the drummers on that recording, maybe from 2003 or so. But anyway, the trio came together, I would say 2018, 2017, 2018. And we did our first recording for ECM. It's just called Trio Tapestry. So between 2018 and into 2019, we were touring, went to Europe 2 or 3 times, played the Village Vanguard in New York and some Midwest gigs, some concerts on the West Coast. And all of the repertoire that is featured on Garden of Expression was written between the 2 sessions. So all the tunes were really new, and we were playing them in performances prior to the date. Then we played in Lugano, Switzerland, November of 2019, and we played in the same beautiful recital hall at the radio in Lugano, right? They have a beautiful hall there that I've played in the past a number of times with other groups of mine, with John Scofield, and also with the Paul Motion Trio with Bill Frisell. It was a very familiar space for me. Beautiful, nice stage, and a really beautiful room to address an audience, you know? So we played the night before for a packed crowd, and we explored this music and really stretched out. Okay. Then the next morning we came and recorded. We changed the way we set up on stage. So we didn't address the seating. We addressed each other on stage. And working with Manfred Eicher and his idea about recording, you know, he focuses on an LP length. Okay. So 45 minutes, 50 minutes at the most of music. Where the night before we played a 90-minute set of the same tunes.
Right.
So we were stretching out, you know, with the focus of creating an atmosphere and sustaining a mood on each piece, but in a real concise kind of a way in the orchestration of it all. There was a lot of magic that happened. And I'm really happy to share that with everyone, you know. So when the pandemic happened, I couldn't go to Europe. I had a tour with Enrico Rava in March and April last year. And I was going to meet Manfred and mix and master the recording. So that tour got canceled with Enrico. So Manfred did the post-production work himself, but he didn't really do it until later in 2020 because of all the lockdowns and everything that was happening in Europe, you know. But I was really happy that he got it together to go and get the tapes and put it together in the sequence. And he's a really master at post-production, you know. So I knew it was going to come out with the love and passion that he has about the music and about making records, you know. ECM is in its 50th year anniversary was 2019. So since 1969, Manfred's been producing and creating some amazing opportunities for everybody, you know, with his idea of what he wants to release as a record producer and the company head. You know? So it's great to work with him, and really, really proud of this recording. You know?
It's absolutely beautiful. I want to encourage everyone, if you haven't heard it, to check it out. It just came out this year. And I was listening to it earlier today and just really captivated by it. It's beautiful.
Well, you know, when you have the LP, it really unfolds different, because the LP, you have the first 4 tunes and then the LP stops. So there's this silence. And you could just meditate on what you just heard, or you can go and flip it over. But like I find myself with the LP, letting each side just unfold on its own, you know? And yeah, I'm really happy with that. And I'm really happy that Manfred is focused on LP length recordings also.
Yeah.
Because you want to hit the repeat button.
Yeah. You mentioned the trio, or you mentioned Paul Motion and the trio with Bill Frisell. And I wanted to ask you about that that trio and what you learned playing with that same band for so many years, and if you have any stories you'd be willing to share.
Well, Bill and I started to play with Paul in 1981, and Paul passed in 2011. So for 30 years, Bill and I played with Paul and went to Europe countless times and did a number of recordings. The band first at the beginning was a quintet with Ed Schuler on bass and Billy Drews on saxophones also, right? And we did our first ECM record. And the first time I was in the studio with Manfred was then. The recording was called Psalm. That was 1981. Before we did that tour in Europe, because we recorded in Germany, in Munich, I started to rehearse with Paul as a quartet with Mark Johnson on bass. And we did one gig as a quartet in Boston. And then Paul wanted to have a quintet with two horns. That's when I got Billy to join us. Billy is a beautiful, incredible improviser, musician. We went to Berklee School of Music together and met in 1971, right? 10 years prior. Also, Bill Frisell was in Boston and at Berklee with us. That's when I first met Bill and played with him in maybe 1972 or 3, somewhere around there. Then Bill went to Europe. He lived in Europe for a while and came back to New York right around the time we started playing with Paul. So the group with Paul had a few different quintet moments with Billy and then with Jim Pepper, amazing, beautiful musician and saxophone player, American Indian from Oklahoma, then grew up in Portland. And Pepper was a real spirit, man. And he would play these eagle tones. I called them eagle tones, these real high altissimo bird calls. Pepper was a real forceful, incredible, powerful saxophone player, And so we did maybe 3 recordings with Paul on the Soul Note label, mid-'80s. And then the trio emerged from one of our concerts during one of our quintet tours with Pepper. And the trio emerged one night. Pepper had just finished a solo with the band. We were playing together collectively. I dropped out and Pepper played as a quartet. Really powerful moment. And when he ended his solo, Eddie stopped with him. And I came back in. And then all of a sudden, Paul and Bill and I were playing this other movement within the same tune, but as a trio. And the music went somewhere completely different. And in the energy and the mood and the color of the sound. And all of a sudden, after the gig that night, Paul came to me and he said, when we go back to New York, I have some new tunes. Let's play at your loft just as a trio. So we did. And then the recording, It Should Have Happened a Long Time Ago, came out. We ended up doing a trio tour in Europe. That was around 1984, maybe. So then it was a trio and a quintet together for a while until it was just the trio with Paul and Bill and I. And man, it was just amazing to explore music with no bass and the way we played as a small orchestra together, And that gave me a lot of ideas and confidence to do my current trio with Marilyn Crispell and Carmen. with no bass. So I'm in that position of where the bass was, just like with Paul and Bill. So I'm able to accompany, harmonize, play as the preacher, and share the space. So yeah, things evolve from your personal experiences in music, you know. And I feel really happy to be able to do these things, you know, and to create some situations also.
Yeah. Well, I'm glad you talked about that. I've always wanted to hear a little bit about that trio. I kind of,
You know,
I always
with
like,
Paul, you know, his history, Bill and I were so hip to Paul,
yeah.
all of his music with Bill Evans and
Mhm.
Keith Jarrett band, you know.
Yeah.
Bill and I heard Paul. I think Bill heard Paul play with Charles Lloyd also. We didn't hear him with Bill Evans, but then we heard him during that period in the early 70s, you know.
Yeah.
Uh, when I heard the Keith Jarrett Quartet with Charlie and Dewey Redman and Charlie Hayden, I mean, that was the music for me at that point. You know, that gave me a lot of direction, you know, about where I'd like to go and the cats I want to play with in my future, you know. Now, I heard those cats in 1972. Started to play with Paul in 81. So throughout those years, a lot of ideas were happening, you know,
Yeah.
and moving to New York and integrating myself on the scene here really made a lot of things happen possible, you know.
Mhm. One thing I always like to ask is, since, you know, CCJ is a youth jazz organization, I like to ask if you have any advice that you would give to a young musician who's trying to get into improvising, or maybe struggling to find their own voice in the music. If you have any advice for the young musician.
Yeah, you know, I mean, listen to everybody. Live in the library of the sounds and spirits of the masters, and try to really hear what you're listening to.
Mm-hmm.
Inner music, you know, no matter what instrument you play, to really feel everything that's going on in the band, in the bass line, in the polyrhythms of the drums,
Mm-hmm.
in the harmonic rhythm in the piano and the bass, but the voicings and colors that happen, you know, form, feeling form and structure. And that leads to you to create forms and structures inside the music, you know.
Mm-hmm.
Listening is everything, you know, for young folks. And then, you know, because it gives you things to reach for. If you're a young saxophone player and you listen to a variety of saxophone players, from Stanley Tarantine to Hank Mobley and Sonny Rollins and Johnny Griffin and Clifford Jordan, Joe Henderson and Wayne Shorter. Just those names alone, you hear their sound and they give you a lot of things to reach for in the art of improvising, you know. So that's something real important. And know where you're from. Realize where you're from. You know, when you mentioned like you're in Denver. Okay, one of the tunes on my recording trio Tapestry, the first tune, I mean that first record, there's a tune called Razzle Dazzle.
Dazzle.
I wrote that tune after playing in the Dazzle at the club.
That's awesome.
But I was there with my quintet, us five. We came and had like 3 or 4 nights there and had a great, I've been there a few times, but with the quintet, with the double drummers, we played Dazzle. I went and I wrote that tune, Razzle Dazzle, man, after playing there. So, you know, as you develop as a player, where you go and in your travels, places inspire you, audiences. And there's another tune on that recording called Terraza, which is Terraza, Spain. And there's a great club there with a real deep history of jazz in Terraza, Spain. And I wrote that tune after playing in Terraza with my classic quartet one night. And it was leading into that recording session, Trio Tapestry. This club, Terraza, had this huge picture of Joe Henderson on the wall. And also Tete Montalou, a blind pianist, amazing pianist from Spain, who played with Johnny Griffin and Joe Henderson and everybody. He was from around there. So his picture was in the club. And knowing the music the way I do, I'm really inspired by the people that create it, you know? So that gives way to a lot of ideas, you know, and for young players to realize that when you're listening to cats and it becomes part of you, you channel a lot of things in the music, you know, and I'm finding the joy in that during this pandemic time. Also listening to a lot of recordings, you know. I have like a number of LPs here in my studio, you know, I don't know, 300-400 LPs maybe, you know. And I've been just randomly going to the shelf and picking an LP and listening to it and keeping it on there for days, not looking for something, just whatever I pick, that's the LP I put on.
That's awesome.
And man, I've been listening to some LPs from my life that I hadn't heard in years. A Lee Morgan recording, or Yusef Lateef, you know, or Charlie Parker record. You know, I pulled out a Lester Young, man, that was so beautiful. A trio with Nat King Cole and Buddy Rich on drums. There was a trio with no bass.
Yeah.
Piano, tenor, and drums. And man, it's one of Lester's most beautiful recordings, man, with Nat King Cole on piano. And Buddy Rich playing all kind of brushes and things, you know. Yeah.
Awesome. Well, I would love to open it up to some listener questions.
Yeah.
Taylor, did you have something?
Mr. Lovano, you kind of started answering my question. I just wanted to ask what you were currently listening to or what you've been listening to. And then also if there are any other arts that you kind of dabble in, if you paint or you write or anything like that.
Well, you know, I've been kind of writing a little bit, just ideas about music and doing some, I don't know, commemorations of certain musicians, you know. I mean, the NEA Jazz Masters Award is coming up, and they're honoring Terry Lynn Carrington and Albert Tootie Heath, Henry Threadgill, and Phil Shapp, who's an amazing historian, you know. But anyway, I played on some tracks with Miguel Zinon and Avishai Cohn. We did some remote recording for the presentation. And they just asked me to say a few words about Albert Tootie Heath. Okay. So I just recorded that today. I think, I'm not sure when it's going to be on. You could find out. The NEA Jazz Masters, the SF Jazz in San Francisco are putting it all together. So maybe if you go to sfjazz.org, they might give you some information about it. I think April 22nd might be the viewing. But anyway, I've been writing some things about some people, you know, reflecting. I haven't been painting, but my wife Judy is so prolific. I'm just like, I'm her biggest fan and checking her out all the time. And that's been, I feel like I'm part of her paintings somehow. I've been cooking a lot. Actually, also,
Wow.
and trying to be creative in the kitchen, like especially during this time where you're not touring and you're not going out anywhere, So that's been really fun. And also just practicing and playing a lot of the instruments within the woodwind family. I have a collection of wood flutes and oriental instruments from around the world from my travels, and percussion instruments also. And I've been really focusing on vibrating on some different tones on these horns,
Absolutely.
Yeah, so that's been really fun,
Thank you.
Thanks, Taylor. If there are any burning questions out there, feel free to let me know.
Well, you know what I'd like to say also, man? Ensemble playing is very important. Like playing together when we can gather again, sharing the space from duets onto larger ensembles, I mean, I had a lot of experience real young playing with saxophone sections and different groupings of horns together, and that really set the stage for me to join the Woody Herman Band in 1976, and then joined the Mel Lewis Jazz Orchestra 1980, and be on that band from 1980 to 91, playing Thad Jones's music and Bob Brookmeyer's music, and developing a way of blending with other people, That's probably one of the most important things for musicians to have an understanding of, because you're not just standing there playing by yourself. When you start to really blend and feel each other's breath and dynamic, that's when you can start to really build some music together with some folks, Now, of course, you have to practice alone and spend some very intimate time with your instrument where it becomes one with you, your ideas, and you get things under your fingertips, yeah. But then you have to do something with those notes, So I would just like encourage folks, when we can gather again, to do so.
Absolutely. Would you be okay with like one or two more questions?
Yeah, sure. Why not?
All right, cool. Well, one we had previously to the interview was if you could talk about what is your most treasured memory of playing with Woody Herman's band?
Well, having Woody's embrace at 23 when I joined the band. That year in 1976 was Woody's 40th anniversary year as a leader. And I stayed on the band until 1979, right? January or so. I was there 2.5 years on it. And during that whole time, we had a week off in the summers and a week off around Christmas. We were on the road one-nighters the whole time I was on the band. And that was amazing to get an itinerary every like 6 weeks with the next 6 weeks mapped out in front of you, That was kind of far out. And playing on his 40th anniversary concert at Carnegie Hall was recorded for RCA. And I found myself in the saxophone section with playing with Frank Tiberi, who had been on the band, and he began leading the band also after Woody had passed, But during that time, 76 to 79, playing with Frank, treasured moments, learning so much from him. Virtuoso musician, and someone that heard Coltrane and had all these tapes that he made himself of Coltrane, his passion. And he was a guiding light playing with Frank. But then this 40th anniversary concert, all of a sudden, we were playing all our parts, and all the soloists were the famous Woody Herman alumni, from Flip Phillips and Jimmy Jufrey and Zoot Sims, Al Cohn, Stan Getz, the Condoli brothers on trumpets, you know, Don Lamond on drums, who was on the original Four Brothers, you know, Chubby Jackson on bass, you know, cats that were in the band from the 40s, you know, the famous musicians I grew up listening to, you know. One of the most treasured moments for me was playing Early Autumn at the microphone, playing my part with Stan Getz playing lead, and trying to blend with Stan and not just play my notes, but to play them with a certain feeling that that he would embrace, you know. And yeah, playing with Woody was amazing, man, because it was my first time touring to Europe and really playing in such a celebrated band.
Thank you for sharing that. That's awesome. I just want to thank you so much. This has been such an inspiring conversation, and I know everyone out there really appreciates that you took the time to hang with us tonight.
I'd like to thank you and everybody for coming and asking me to join in on your series. And yeah, good luck, everybody. To live in the world of music is a blessing for all.
It really is.